I'm Roy, 35, standing in my Chicago apartment watching the city lights flicker like stars beneath me. The phone in my hand still warm from my father's ultimatum. Either co-sign your sister's loan, or you're dead to us. Their words hang in the air, heavy with betrayal. For years I've been their ATM, their safety net, their good son. But tonight, something inside me finally snapped. Before I tell you how I escaped my toxic family, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when everyone expected you to cave in. Life wasn't always this complicated. I worked hard to build something for myself, brick by careful brick. As a software engineer at Tech Fusion, one of Chicago's leading tech companies, I earned a comfortable six-figure salary that allowed me to purchase my downtown apartment 3 years ago, at 30. The view of Lake Michigan cost extra, but I figured I deserved something nice after putting myself through college, working 2 jobs while maintaining a 4-point GPA, and climbing the corporate ladder through sheer determination. What most of my colleagues don't know is how I grew up. We weren't poor, exactly, but money was always a source of tension. Dad worked as a sales manager at a car dealership, and Mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. Middle class on paper, but my parents had expensive tastes and poor financial habits. I learned early on that if I wanted something, I needed to earn it myself. My sister Jessica, 2 years younger than me, had a completely different experience. While I was mowing lawns at 13, she was getting her allowance doubled because girls have more expenses. When I saved for 6 months to buy my first computer, Jessica whined for 2 days and got a brand new laptop. The pattern was established early and only grew more pronounced with time. Your sister is sensitive, Mom would say whenever I pointed out the discrepancy. She needs more support. Dad was more direct. Man up, Roy. You're the oldest. Act like it. By high school, I was working 20 hours a week at the local grocery store while maintaining straight A's. Jessica dropped out of 3 extracurriculars because they were too stressful and barely graduated with a C average. Yet somehow, I was the one who got lectured when I couldn't make it to her dance recitals because I was working. College was the first taste of freedom. I got a scholarship that covered tuition, worked to pay for everything else, and limited my visits home to holidays. Jessica enrolled in the community college, dropped out after 1 semester, tried another school, dropped out again. This became her pattern. Start something with great enthusiasm, lose interest, quit, and wait for someone to bail her out. And someone always did. My parents drained their savings, took out second mortgages, and when those resources dried up, they turned to me. The first time was during my senior year of college. Jessica had maxed out her credit cards and couldn't make rent. Just this once, Dad said. She's really turning things around. I sent her $500. Then another $600 3 months later. By the time I was 26, I had loaned Jessica over $20,000 that I never saw again. My parents, Harold and Eleanor, had their own financial issues. Dad had a heart attack when I was 28, which led to massive medical bills despite insurance. Mom's school cut back on teacher benefits. Their mortgage was underwater after the housing market crash. I started helping them too, first with temporary assistance for Dad's medications, then with Mom's car payment, then property taxes. Soon, I was paying over $2,000 monthly to keep them afloat, all while they maintained appearances in their social circle as the successful couple with the beautiful house. They never acknowledged these payments as anything other than what was expected of a dutiful son. No thank you, no recognition of sacrifice, just the occasional comment about how lucky I was to have a good job, unlike poor Jessica who just hadn't found her passion yet. Jessica, now 33, had cycled through jobs as a receptionist, retail associate, yoga instructor, real estate agent, that lasted 3 weeks, app developer, despite having no training, and most recently, personal assistant to a local business owner. None lasted more than a few months. Each departure came with a story about toxic workplaces, unfair bosses, or health issues that prevented her from continuing. Meanwhile, I built my career methodically. Junior developer to senior developer to team lead to engineering manager. I saved, invested, lived below my means except for my apartment. The one indulgence I allowed myself. I dated occasionally but never seriously. Relationships took time and emotional energy I couldn't spare while supporting 3 adults. Harold, my father, ruled our family with the confidence of someone who believed his perspective was the only valid one. 6'2" with a booming voice and firm handshake, he charmed strangers but terrorized his household with his unpredictable temper. Nothing I achieved was ever quite good enough. My scholarship should have been bigger. My salary should have grown faster. My apartment should have been in a more prestigious building. For Jessica, different rules applied. Her failures were learning experiences. Her financial disasters were temporary setbacks. Her inability to support herself well into her 30s was because the economy is tough for young people these days. Eleanor, my mother, was Harold's perfect complement, quiet where he was loud, soothing where he was abrasive, but equally committed to the family mythology that positioned Jessica as the fragile flower needing protection, and me as the sturdy oak expected to weather any storm. She never openly disagreed with Harold, but wielded her own power through guilt and emotional manipulation. "Your father is so stressed about Jessica," she would sigh during our weekly phone calls. "I'm worried about his heart. If only there was something we could do to help her get on her feet." That something always involved my checkbook. The financial toll was significant, but measurable. I could track exactly how much supporting my family cost me each month. The emotional toll was harder to quantify, but far more damaging. Each interaction left me drained. Each request chipped away at my self-worth. Each comparison to Jessica's latest drama reminded me that in my family's eyes, my stability made me boring, and my success made me an ATM. Yet I continued, telling myself I was doing the right thing, being responsible, taking care of my family, as a good son should. I set up automatic payments for my parents' bills. $250 for Dad's specialized medications not covered by insurance, $485 for Mom's car payment, $320 toward their property taxes each month, $700 toward their mortgage, plus extras whenever an emergency arose. I didn't tell my friends about these arrangements. I certainly didn't tell my financial advisor, who would have been horrified at how I was sabotaging my own financial future. I just paid and told myself that someday, somehow, things would change. I was wrong. Things didn't change. They escalated. The call came at 8:45 on a Friday evening. I was just settling in with a beer, and the new thriller series everyone at work had been talking about when my phone buzzed with my father's name. Roy. His voice had that forced joviality that always meant he wanted something. "How's my boy doing? Busy saving the digital world?" My stomach tightened. "Hi, Dad. I'm good. Just unwinding after work. How are you and Mom?" "We're fine. Just fine. Your mother's right here. Say hello, Eleanor." Mom's voice came on, high and strained. "Hello, darling. We miss you. You should come visit soon." "I'd like that," I lied. My last visit had consisted of 3 days listening to Jessica's newest business idea, organic dog treats this time, and writing a check to cover the property taxes my parents had forgotten were due. "Listen, son." Dad's voice returned. All pretense of casual conversation gone. "We need to talk to you about your sister. She's in a bit of a situation." Of course she was. Jessica was perpetually in a situation. "What happened?" I asked, already calculating how much this would cost me. "Well, you know she's been working for that marketing fellow. But there was a disagreement about work hours, and it just wasn't a good fit." Translation: Jessica got fired. Again. "That's her 3rd job this year," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "The job market is very competitive, Mom chimed in defensively. And Jessica has such creative talents that aren't appreciated in conventional workplaces. Dad cleared his throat. The point is, she's between opportunities right now, and there's been some issue with her rent. How much is she behind? I asked directly. A pause. 3 months. 3 months? Dad, that's around $6,000 with late fees, he interrupted. But that's not really the issue. The landlord is being unreasonable and has started eviction proceedings. My head started pounding. So what exactly are you asking me for this time? Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear them exchanging whispers. Jessica has been thinking about her future, Mom said, taking over the conversation. She's realized that working for others isn't playing to her strengths. She wants to open her own business. A hair salon, Dad added quickly. She took those cosmetology classes a few years back, remember? I remembered. 6 months of classes that I had paid for, followed by exactly 2 weeks working at Supercuts before she quit because the chemicals were affecting her creativity. She's found the perfect location, Mom continued, enthusiasm forced into every syllable. It's a small space in that up-and-coming neighborhood. What's it called, Harold? Lincoln Park, Dad supplied. Lincoln Park isn't up-and-coming. It's already one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Chicago, I pointed out. Well, that's why it's such a good investment opportunity, Dad countered. Jessica has done her research. She has a business plan and everything. That was new. Can I see this business plan? Another uncomfortable pause. It's still being finalized, Dad said. The important thing is that she needs to secure the lease and renovate the space. She's found a small business loan that would cover everything, and there it was. But they want a co-signer. I finished for him. Just as a formality, Mom rushed to add, Jessica will be making all the payments. You won't have to contribute a cent. How much is this loan? I asked. Though I already knew it would be substantial. Dad coughed. $75,000. The amount hit me like a physical blow. $75,000 for a first-time business with no track record. Run by someone who has never held a job for more than 6 months? What bank is even considering this? It's not exactly a bank, Dad admitted. It's a private lender that specializes in small business opportunities. A predatory lender, then. Probably with interest rates that would make a credit card company blush. This is a terrible idea, I said flatly. Jessica has no business experience, no proven work ethic, and frankly, no history of following through on anything. I can't co-sign a loan that size. Roy, Mom gasped. How can you say such awful things about your sister? I'm being realistic. You should be too. This is $75,000 we're talking about. Money, money, money. Dad's voice had taken on the disgusted tone I knew well. Always counting pennies. Your sister has a dream, Roy. Are you really going to stand in her way because you're too selfish to sign a piece of paper? The conversation deteriorated from there. 20 minutes of accusations, guilt-tripping, and emotional manipulation. By the time I hung up, I felt sick to my stomach and utterly drained. But I wasn't ready to give in yet. I needed to hear Jessica's side of this story. I called her immediately. What? She answered, clearly annoyed. Jessica, Mom and Dad just called me about co-signing a loan for your salon idea. Oh. Her voice immediately shifted to an upbeat tone that sounded rehearsed. Isn't it exciting? I've finally found my true calling. I'm going to revolutionize the salon experience in Chicago. With what experience? I asked. You never even worked as a stylist after getting your certificate. I've been studying online tutorials. Besides, I'll hire experienced stylists. I'll handle the business side. That was even more concerning. What business experience do you have? God, Roy, why are you being such a downer? This is a great opportunity. The space is perfect, and the neighborhood is totally trending. Can you send me your business plan? I'd like to look it over before I make any decisions about co-signing. A long silence followed. It's not completely finalized yet. Then what projections are you using to determine if you can pay back a $75,000 loan? I don't need to justify myself to you, she snapped. Either you support me, or you don't. It's not that simple when you're asking me to put my financial future on the line. Oh, please, you make tons of money. If anything happened, you could cover it without even noticing. This was so far from the truth that I almost laughed. Jessica, I have my own expenses. And I'm already supporting Mom and Dad in ways you don't even know about. Well, maybe you should support your sister too. That's what family does. What would the money be used for? Exactly. I pressed. Another pause. Renovations, equipment, initial inventory, marketing, first and last month's rent on the space. And your personal debts? I asked, knowing my sister too well. I need to be financially stable to focus on the business, she admitted reluctantly. So, yes, some would go to clear up my current situation. How much? $20,000, give or take. So nearly a third of the loan would go to bailing her out of her current financial mess before a single dollar went toward the actual business. This was exactly what I had feared. Have you ever run a business before? I asked. Do you know how to do payroll, taxes, inventory management, marketing? I can learn all that, she dismissed. There are apps for most of it anyway. And how will you pay your personal expenses while the business gets established? New businesses often don't turn a profit for the first year or more. Mom and Dad said they'd help me out until the salon takes off. I closed my eyes, feeling a headache building. Mom and Dad could barely manage their own expenses without my help. If they took on Jessica's as well, even more would fall on my shoulders. Look, I said finally, I don't think this is a good idea. The loan is too big, the plan is too vague, and there's no evidence you're prepared to run a business. Wow, she said coldly. I knew you were selfish, but this is low even for you. After everything our parents have done for you, what have they done for me? Exactly. The words came out before I could stop them. Raised you, loved you, always believed in you, while you've become this cold, calculating machine who can't even help his own sister. The conversation ended with Jessica hanging up on me. I sat in my living room, staring at the darkened TV screen, and wondered when exactly I had become the villain in my family's story. I spent the weekend researching. First, I looked up the failure rates of new businesses. Approximately 80% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years. Then I investigated the cosmetology industry, specifically, highly competitive, requiring both technical skill and business acumen. I even found statistics on salon startups in Chicago. The market was saturated, especially in upscale neighborhoods like Lincoln Park. By Sunday evening, I had compiled enough data to confirm what my instincts had already told me. This was a terrible investment with almost no chance of success. Signing that loan would be financial suicide. I called my friend Kevin, the only person who truly understood my family dynamics. They're manipulating you again, he said bluntly after I explained the situation. If you co-sign that loan, you'll be paying it off for the next decade. I know, I sighed. But they're making me feel like I'm abandoning my sister if I don't do it. Has Jessica ever shown any indication she could successfully run a business? Or even hold down a job for a full year? No. Has she ever paid back any of the money you've loaned her over the years? No. Then why would this time be different? It wouldn't be. We both knew that. Write them an email, Kevin suggested. Lay out your concerns professionally. Offer alternatives that don't involve you co-signing a massive loan. Create a paper trail in case they try to twist your words later. That night, I drafted a careful email. I explained that while I supported Jessica's entrepreneurial ambitions, I couldn't in good conscience co-sign a loan of that size given her financial history and lack of business experience. I suggested alternatives. Start smaller with a booth rental at an established salon. Build a client base first. Take business classes. Develop a detailed business plan with realistic projections. I concluded by offering to help Jessica in non-financial ways, reviewing her business plan when it was complete, connecting her with contacts in the business world, even helping her find resources for entrepreneurs. The response came Monday morning. Not an email, but a video call request from my father. I accepted it during my lunch break, stepping into an empty conference room at work. Dad's face filled my screen, flushed with anger. Mom hovered in the background, eyes red from crying. "What the hell is this email?" Dad demanded without preamble. "It's my response to your request," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I've given it a lot of thought, and I just can't co-sign the loan. But I've offered several alternatives." "Alternatives?" He cut me off. "Your sister doesn't need alternatives. She needs your signature on that loan application. Period." "Dad, be reasonable. $75,000 is—" "I don't want to hear about the money," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "This is about loyalty. This is about family, something you clearly know nothing about." Mom stepped forward, her voice quavering. "Roy, sweetie, we're not asking you to pay anything. Just sign the paper so Jessica can have her chance. But if she can't pay, I'll be responsible for the full amount." "And given her history—" "Her history?" Dad interrupted again. "What about your history? The history of turning your back on the people who raised you, who sacrificed everything for you." This revisionist family history was a familiar tactic. My parents had provided the basics: food, shelter, clothing. But I had been financially independent since my first part-time job at 15. Every significant expense from my teenage years onward had come from my own pocket. "I haven't turned my back on anyone," I said quietly. "I help you both every month with bills. And now we're asking for your help with this," Mom cried. "Why is that so difficult?" "Because it's financial suicide," I wanted to say. "Because Jessica has never completed anything she's started. Because this investment has disaster written all over it." Instead, I tried reason one more time. "I've outlined some alternatives in my email that would help Jessica achieve her goals with less risk." "Those aren't alternatives," Dad dismissed. "Those are excuses. This is your sister's one chance to make something of herself, and you're blocking it because you're too selfish to help." "It's not selfishness to be concerned about a $75,000 liability," I countered. Dad's expression hardened. "Here's how this is going to go. Either you co-sign that loan, or you're no longer part of this family." The statement hung in the air between us. "Harold," Mom whispered. But there was no real objection in her tone. "I mean it," Dad continued. "If you can't do this one thing for your sister, then you're not the son we raised. You're dead to us." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're giving me an ultimatum? Sign a potentially ruinous loan or be disowned?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." Mom was crying openly now. "Roy, please. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Jessica needs this chance." My phone buzzed with incoming text messages. Jessica, no doubt, coordinating her attack with our parents. "I need time to think," I managed to say. "There's nothing to think about," Dad barked. "The loan officer needs an answer by tomorrow. Co-sign or get out of our lives. Your choice." The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at a blank screen. I looked down at my phone to see a string of texts from Jessica, alternating between guilt trips and personal attacks. "I always knew you never cared about me. Family helps family. Guess you missed that memo. Must be nice to be so perfect and successful while stomping on everyone else's dreams." Then came the extended family. Aunt Phyllis called to tell me how disappointed she was in my lack of family spirit. Uncle Ned texted that I should man up and help my sister. Cousin Angela left a voicemail suggesting that my fancy job had made me forget where I came from. The coordinated assault was overwhelming, but somewhere in the barrage, something crystallized for me. This wasn't new behavior. It was just more extreme than usual. My entire relationship with my family had been built on emotional manipulation, financial exploitation, and conditional love. For years, I had been valued not for who I was, but for what I could provide. As I sat in that conference room, I had what I can only describe as a moment of clarity. I could see the pattern stretching back years, decades even. I could project it forward into a future where I would forever be the family ATM, expected to bail out my sister repeatedly, while my parents enabled her irresponsibility. I could also see, for the first time with complete clarity, what would happen if I co-signed that loan. Jessica would default. The business would fail. I would be left with the debt and the blame. If only you had been more supportive. If only you had given more. If only you had believed in her vision. It was a future I suddenly knew with absolute certainty I did not want. That evening, I called Dr. Sarah Bennett, the therapist I had been seeing sporadically for the past year to deal with work stress. I hadn't realized until that moment how much of my work stress was actually family stress in disguise. "It sounds like you're experiencing a significant boundary violation," she said after I explained the situation. "Your family is essentially saying their love is conditional on your financial compliance." "That's exactly what it feels like," I admitted. "But am I overreacting? Should I just sign and hope for the best? Let me ask you this. If a friend told you their family was pressuring them to take on potentially crippling debt with no safeguards, what would you advise them?" Put that way, the answer was obvious. I'd tell them it was a terrible idea, and they shouldn't do it. And why would you give that advice? Because it would be financially irresponsible and potentially ruinous. So why is it different when it's you? I had no good answer for that. "Roy," Sarah continued gently, "from what you've shared over our sessions, this ultimatum is part of a long-established pattern in your family dynamics. Your parents have consistently prioritized your sister's wants over your needs. They've normalized financial exploitation, disguised as family obligation, and they've punished you emotionally when you've attempted to establish even the most reasonable boundaries." Hearing someone else articulate the pattern so clearly was both validating and painful. "So what do I do now?" I asked. "That's entirely your decision. But I would suggest taking some time away to consider your next steps without the pressure of immediate family influence." Distance often provides clarity. Distance. The word resonated in a way I hadn't expected. After our session, I opened my laptop and checked my vacation days. I had accumulated over 4 weeks of unused time, repeatedly postponing trips because of family emergencies. What if I actually used some of that time? What if I went somewhere, anywhere, away from Chicago, away from the reach of my family's emotional terrorism? On impulse, I searched for flights. Hawaii had always been on my bucket list, warm, beautiful, and far away from Illinois. There was a red-eye leaving O'Hare the next night, with seats available. Before I could overthink it, I booked a ticket and reserved a room at a beachfront resort on Maui. As soon as I completed the transaction, a weight lifted from my shoulders. For 2 weeks, I would be thousands of miles away, in a different time zone, surrounded by ocean and sunshine instead of family drama and Midwest winter. The relief was immediate and intoxicating. Next, I contacted my boss, explained that I needed emergency personal leave, and arranged for my projects to be covered during my absence. She was surprisingly understanding, even commenting that she'd been concerned about my stress levels recently. As I began packing, my phone continued to buzz with messages from family members. Cousin Angela called again, her tone more aggressive this time. "You need to stop being so selfish," she said without even a greeting. "Your parents are beside themselves with worry about Jessica. Why aren't they worried about pressuring me to take on massive debt?" I countered. "Because you can handle it. You've always been the stable one. Jessica needs more support. And what happens when I'm not stable anymore because I'm drowning in debt that isn't mine?" "You're catastrophizing," she dismissed. "The business will be fine." "Based on what evidence?" I challenged. "Jessica has never successfully completed anything she started. She has no business experience. The salon industry has a high failure rate. Why should I believe this time will be different? Because she's family, Angela said, as if that answered all questions. We support family no matter what. Even when it's enabling destructive behavior? You sound like one of those self-help books, she scoffed. Family isn't about analyzing costs and benefits. It's about being there. Period. I realized there was no point in continuing the conversation. Angela, like most of my extended family, had bought into the narrative that Jessica was a fragile flower, needing constant protection. And I was a heartless calculator for daring to consider consequences. I have to go, I said, ending the call over her continued arguments. Uncle Fred was next, leaving a blistering voicemail about how disappointed my grandfather would have been in my selfish attitude. This was particularly rich coming from a man who had borrowed $8,000 from me 3 years ago for urgent medical expenses and never mentioned repayment again. By evening, I had a packed suitcase, my passport, and a growing sense of determination. The financial dependence my family had on me suddenly seemed crystal clear. They weren't just asking for occasional help. They had structured their entire lives around my support. My income wasn't supplementing theirs. It was the foundation upon which their lifestyle was built. Just as I was contemplating this uncomfortable truth, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. If you don't sign this loan, you'll never see me again. Is that what you want? To lose your only sister forever? I stared at the message, feeling a complex mix of sadness, anger, and strange relief. Was that what she thought of our relationship? That it could be severed completely over a business loan? If so, what kind of relationship did we actually have? I typed back, I love you, Jess, but I can't help you this way. There are other options we could discuss. Her response came seconds later. F times CQ and your options. You've always been jealous of me. You want me to fail, so you can keep being the golden child. Well, guess what? Mom and Dad see through your act. They know what a selfish prick you really are. I put the phone down, surprisingly calm despite the venom in her words. In a way, her response confirmed that I was making the right decision. Before turning in for the night, I logged into my online banking account. I had set up automatic payments for various bills related to my parents: Dad's medications, Mom's car payment, their property tax, contributions to their mortgage. There were individual transfers to their checking account each month labeled family support. All told, I was sending them over $2,000 monthly. I stared at the screen, calculating how much I had given them over the years. The total was staggering, easily into 6 figures when I included the emergency expenses and loans to Jessica. What had I received in return? Not gratitude. Not respect. Certainly not love. That didn't come with strings attached. Instead, I got manipulation, guilt, and now, an ultimatum that threatened to sever our relationship entirely if I didn't comply with their demands. With a clarity that felt almost surgical, I realized what I needed to do. The next morning, I woke to find my phone bombarded with missed calls and increasingly hostile text messages. The most recent was from my father. You'll regret this when Jessica is homeless. Is that what you want? Your sister living on the street because of your selfishness? My mother's messages were more emotional. Please call us, Roy. We raised you better than this. My heart is breaking. Jessica had alternated between rage and self-pity throughout the night. I hope you're happy knowing you've ruined my one chance. And later, I don't know how I'll survive now. If anything happens to me, it's on your conscience. These messages, designed to provoke maximum guilt, would have devastated me just days earlier. Now, they only strengthened my resolve. The manipulation was so transparent, so calculated, that it had the opposite of its intended effect. I made a cup of coffee and sat down at my kitchen counter, ready to make the hardest decision of my adult life. Opening my laptop, I navigated to my banking portal and began the process of canceling every automatic payment I had set up for my parents. Dad's medication supplement. Cancelled. Mom's car payment. Cancelled. Their property tax contribution. Cancelled. Monthly family support transfer. Cancelled. Each click felt both terrible and liberating, like cutting off a gangrenous limb to save the rest of the body. I was ending a financial relationship that had become increasingly toxic and one-sided. But I was also knowingly creating hardship for people I loved. Despite everything. Next, I logged into my credit card account. I had added my parents as authorized users years ago for emergencies. They had slowly begun using the card for groceries, gas, and eventually, daily expenses. Last month's bill showed charges at restaurants, clothing stores, and even a spa day for my mother. I removed them as authorized users and requested new cards for myself. Finally, I drafted an email. Unlike my previous attempt at reason, this one was brief and to the point. Dad, Mom, and Jessica, after careful consideration, I've decided that I cannot and will not co-sign Jessica's business loan. This decision is final. Furthermore, I am ending all financial support effective immediately. The automatic payments I've been making toward your expenses have been canceled. You will need to make other arrangements going forward. This isn't a decision I've made lightly, but your ultimatum made it clear that our relationship has become primarily transactional. If my value to you is measured only by my willingness to take on financial risk on your behalf, then perhaps it's best we take some time apart. I will be unreachable for the next 2 weeks as I'll be traveling. When I return, I'm open to discussing rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms if you're willing. Roy. I read it over 3 times, each time fighting the urge to soften it, to apologize, to offer some compromise. But there could be no compromise with people who saw my boundaries as obstacles to be demolished, rather than expressions of my autonomy to be respected. I hit send, then blocked all 3 of their numbers on my phone. For good measure, I also blocked Uncle Fred, Aunt Phyllis, and Cousin Angela. The extended family assault team would undoubtedly be mobilized once my parents realized I had cut off the financial spigot. With those tasks completed, I called a taxi to take me to O'Hare. As we drove through the familiar streets of Chicago, I felt like I was seeing everything through new eyes. The buildings, the lake, the winter sky, all unchanged. But my perception had shifted fundamentally. The taxi pulled up to the departures terminal. I paid the driver, grabbed my suitcase, and walked into the airport with the strange sensation of being both heavier with grief and lighter with relief. Check-in and security were unremarkable, mechanical processes that gave me time to think. Had I overreacted? Was I making a terrible mistake? Would I regret this decision and find myself alone in the world, cut off from the only family I had? These doubts followed me to the gate, where I sat watching families and couples and solo travelers pass by. An older couple caught my eye. They were helping each other with their carry-on bags, the man gently guiding his wife's elbow as they navigated the crowded terminal. That small gesture of genuine care made my throat tight. That was what family should look like. Mutual support, not one-way extraction. As boarding time approached, my phone buzzed with an email notification. I almost ignored it, assuming it was work-related, but the preview caught my eye. It was from Jessica's loan officer, responding to an email I hadn't sent. Dear Mr. Keller, thank you for your inquiry. I can confirm that without a co-signer meeting our credit requirements, we cannot proceed with Ms. Keller's loan application. The application has been marked as denied in our system. My father must have given the loan officer my email address, expecting me to contact them to arrange the co-signing. Instead, they were now informing me that without my participation, the loan was officially dead. Almost simultaneously, another email arrived, this one from my credit card company, confirming the removal of authorized users and alerting me to a declined transaction attempt minutes ago at a gas station near my parents' house. The wheels were in motion now. My family would be discovering, one by one, that the Bank of Roy had permanently closed. I should have felt guilty. I should have been consumed with worry about how they would manage. Instead, what I felt was something unfamiliar and almost frightening in its intensity. Freedom. When my boarding group was called, I switched my phone to airplane mode, effectively cutting the last line of communication with my past life. As I settled into my window seat, I watched the ground crew finish their preparations, marveling at the precision of their movements, the way each person knew exactly their role in the complex choreography of airplane departure. The engines roared to life. The plane backed away from the gate. We taxied to the runway, waited our turn, and then accelerated into the darkening sky. As Chicago fell away beneath us, shrinking to a glittering grid and then to nothing as we pushed through the cloud layer, I felt something release inside me. A knot of tension I had carried for so long that I'd forgotten it wasn't a natural part of my body. 30,000 feet in the air, suspended between my old life and whatever waited in Hawaii, I closed my eyes and slept more peacefully than I had in years. The flight to Hawaii was long, but for the first time in memory, I wasn't checking my phone compulsively for family emergencies or work crises. Somewhere over the Pacific, I woke to find the cabin dark and most passengers asleep. The man beside me, however, was awake and reading a thick historical novel illuminated by his overhead light. "Can't sleep on planes?" he asked. Noticing I was awake. "Actually, I slept better than expected," I admitted. First vacation in years. He introduced himself as Michael, a business consultant from Seattle. We fell into easy conversation, the kind that happens between strangers who know they'll never meet again. "Family trip?" he asked. "Solo. Needed to get away and clear my head." Something in my tone must have revealed more than my words, because Michael nodded with unexpected understanding. "I did the same thing about 5 years ago," he said. "Left everything behind for 2 weeks in Thailand after a particularly nasty falling out with my brother. Best decision I ever made." "How did things work out with your brother?" I couldn't help asking. Michael closed his book. We didn't speak for almost a year. When we finally did reconnect, it was on completely different terms. I realized I had been letting him manipulate me since we were kids. The distance helped me see the pattern. And now, we have a relationship, but with clear boundaries. I love him, but I don't let him walk all over me anymore. He smiled. "It's actually better this way. Healthier. He respects me now in a way he never did when I was his personal bailout service." The parallel to my situation was uncanny. I found myself sharing more than I'd intended. The ultimatum, Jessica's loan, the years of financial dependence my family had developed. Classic enabling behavior. Michael nodded. "You're doing the right thing, even though it feels terrible right now. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop rescuing them from the consequences of their own choices." His words stayed with me as the plane began its descent into Maui. The first glimpse of the island from the air was breathtaking. Lush green mountains, pristine beaches, and the endless blue of the Pacific surrounding it all. It looked like a postcard, a place too perfect to be real. Stepping off the plane into the open-air terminal, I was enveloped by warm, flower-scented air. Everything, the light, the temperature, the colors, was different from Chicago's winter gray. I collected my luggage, picked up my rental car, and drove to the resort with the windows down, letting the tropical breeze wash over me. The resort was even more beautiful than the pictures online had suggested. My room overlooked the ocean, with a private lanai where I could sit and watch the waves. After unpacking, I walked down to the beach, removed my shoes, and felt sand between my toes for the first time in years. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected on the water. Couples and families strolled along the shore. Children played in the gentle surf. Everyone seemed relaxed, present in a way that made me realize how disconnected I had been from simple pleasures. That night, I slept with the balcony door open, lulled by the sound of waves and the fragrance of plumeria. I woke before dawn, drawn to the lanai by the changing light. Watching the sun rise over the ocean, I experienced a moment of pure peace that I hadn't felt since childhood. The first few days of my vacation passed in a blur of new experiences. I tried snorkeling, marveling at the colorful fish and coral reefs just offshore. I hiked to a waterfall, feeling my city-bound muscles protest then gradually strengthen. I ate fresh pineapple and fish, caught that morning, and discovered that real Hawaiian food bore little resemblance to the mainland chain restaurant version. Throughout it all, I resisted the urge to check my email or turn off airplane mode on my phone. This was my time. Perhaps the first, truly uninterrupted time I had given myself in adulthood. On the fourth day, I signed up for an island tour. Our guide, Lisa, was a transplant from California who had moved to Maui 15 years ago and never left. She had an encyclopedic knowledge of the island's history, ecology, and culture, which she shared with infectious enthusiasm. As our small group explored hidden beaches and scenic overlooks, I found myself often in conversation with Lisa. During a lunch break at a small roadside stand famous for its fish tacos, she joined me at my table. "So what brings you to Maui alone?" she asked. "Most people come with family or partners." I hesitated, then gave her an abbreviated version of recent events. To my surprise, she nodded in immediate understanding. "Family systems can be so complicated," she said. "Everyone falls into roles that can be really hard to break out of. You sound like you speak from experience." She smiled. "What do you think drove me to move 5,000 miles away from everyone I knew? My family had me cast as the responsible one, the fixer, the emotional support animal. I was drowning in their needs while neglecting my own. So you just left? Not quite that simple. I tried setting boundaries first, but they kept getting trampled. Eventually, I realized I needed physical distance to establish emotional distance. Hence, Hawaii." She gestured at the paradise around us. "Best decision I ever made. Did your family ever understand?" "Some did, eventually. Others never will. I had to make peace with that." She took a sip of her iced tea. "The hardest lesson was accepting that I can't control how others receive my boundaries. I can only control whether I maintain them." That conversation marked a turning point in my trip. I began journaling each morning on my lanai, documenting not just what I was doing but what I was feeling and realizing about myself and my family dynamics. I saw how I had been cast as the family provider, the successful one who didn't need emotional support because I was so independent. I recognized how this role had shaped my relationships outside the family too. I gravitated toward people who needed fixing, who took more than they gave, replicating the imbalance I had grown up with. I realized that my self-worth had become dangerously entangled with my utility to others. If I wasn't providing financial support or solving problems, did I have value? The question was uncomfortable, but essential. Most importantly, I began to envision a different kind of life. One where relationships were reciprocal, where my needs mattered too, where no was a complete sentence that didn't require justification or apology. The second week of my vacation brought deeper exploration, both of the island and myself. I took a helicopter tour over volcanic craters and hidden valleys. I learned to stand up paddleboard in a protected cove. I attended a traditional luau and listened to stories of Hawaiian gods and heroes. Throughout it all, I felt myself changing. Not in dramatic ways, but in the subtle shifting of perspective that comes with distance and reflection. I was becoming more comfortable in my own company, more attuned to my own desires, more protective of my own peace. On my last evening in Hawaii, I returned to the beach where I had watched my first Maui sunset. Lisa, the tour guide who had become something of a friend, joined me after her shift ended. "So," she said as we watched the sun sink toward the horizon, "what happens when you go back to Chicago?" "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?" I replied. "I can't stay in Hawaii forever." "Why not?" she teased. I did. I laughed. I actually like my job. And Chicago is home, despite everything. But things will be different? They have to be, I said with newfound certainty. I can't go back to being the family ATM. I can't keep enabling behaviors that are ultimately destructive. Even if that's what they want from me. It won't be easy, she warned. Systems resist change. Your family has operated a certain way for decades. They'll push hard to get you back in line. I know. But I'm stronger now. As the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant orange and purple, Lisa asked, "What about your sister? Do you think she'll ever understand why you couldn't co-sign that loan?" I considered the question carefully. I don't know. Maybe someday. But I've realized that her understanding isn't required for my decision to be right. Lisa smiled. Now that sounds like someone who's done some real healing. Later that night, packing for my return flight, I felt none of the dread I had anticipated. Instead, I was calm, resolved, even eager to implement the insights I had gained. Hawaii had been more than a vacation. It had been a reset, a chance to step outside the narrative my family had constructed and write my own story going forward. Returning to Chicago was like stepping into a familiar room where all the furniture had been subtly rearranged. Everything looked the same, but felt different. Because I was different. My apartment, once just a place to sleep between work and family obligations, now felt like a sanctuary. I moved through the rooms with new appreciation for the space I had created for myself, the life I had built through my own efforts. Eventually, I had to face what I had been avoiding. I turned my phone back on and watched as it vibrated continuously with accumulated notifications. Dozens of missed calls, voicemails, texts, and emails from family members, some angry, some pleading, all aimed at bringing me back into the fold. I skimmed through them, noting the progression from outrage to disbelief to grudging acceptance. The most recent messages were less emotional, more practical, indications that my family was beginning to adjust to the new reality, where Roy wasn't the solution to every financial problem. Among them was an email from Jessica, sent just yesterday. Unlike her earlier communications, this one lacked the usual accusations and demands. Roy, I don't know if you're reading these, but I wanted to say I'm sorry for how things went down. I was wrong to expect you to risk your financial future for my business idea. I was angry and said things I didn't mean. When you get back, maybe we could meet and talk? Just talk. No money involved. I miss my big brother. The message surprised me. It was the first time in years Jessica had acknowledged any fault or considered my perspective. Whether it represented genuine growth or was simply a new manipulation tactic remained to be seen, but it was a start. I called Kevin that evening, and we met for dinner at our favorite burger place. He listened intently as I recounted the events of the past 2 weeks. "You look different," he said when I finished. "More at peace. I feel different," I admitted. Like I've finally allowed myself to put on my own oxygen mask first. "About time," he grinned. "So what's the latest with the family drama? Have they burned you an effigy yet?" I laughed. "Close to it, from some of the messages. But things have calmed down a bit. Dad had to sell his beloved Audi to cover some immediate expenses. Mom's applying for a teaching assistant position to supplement her income. And Jessica's moved back in with them. Temporarily. Sounds like reality is setting in. Apparently my contributions were more significant than even I realized." I took a sip of my beer. The weird thing is, I think this might eventually be better for all of them. They're being forced to face the consequences of their choices and find solutions that don't involve my checkbook. And what about you? What's your next move? I had been thinking about this question throughout my flight home. I'm going to write them all emails. Clear, compassionate but firm. I'll lay out what kind of relationship I'm willing to have going forward, including the boundaries that aren't negotiable, such as No more financial support without clear terms and repayment plans. No more emotional blackmail. No more treating me like an ATM, rather than a person with my own needs and feelings. I paused, and I'm suggesting family therapy if they want to rebuild our relationship. It's the only way we'll break these patterns. Kevin nodded approvingly. Think they'll go for it? Dad? Doubtful. Mom might eventually. Jessica. I considered her email again. Maybe. There might be hope there. Over the next few days, I drafted and sent my emails. My father's response was predictably dismissive, calling therapy new age nonsense and suggesting I was the one with problems. Not him. My mother was more receptive but non-committal, saying she needed time to think about everything. Jessica, surprisingly, responded with a request to meet in person. We arranged to get coffee at a neutral location the following weekend. When Saturday came, I arrived early at the cafe, selecting a table by the window. I felt nervous, but centered, ready for whatever version of Jessica would show up. The manipulative sister I had grown accustomed to, or the potentially more self-aware woman from the email. She arrived 5 minutes late, looking different than I remembered. Less polished, more subdued. The designer handbag and carefully styled hair were gone, replaced by a simple ponytail and practical clothing. "Hi," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course." I studied her face, trying to gauge her state of mind. "How are you doing?" She gave a small laugh. "Honestly, I've been better. Turns out, when your financial safety net disappears overnight, you have to make some adjustments." "I can imagine." "No, you probably can't," she said, but without malice. "You've always been self-sufficient." I never learned that skill. The acknowledgement surprised me. It's not too late to learn. That's what I'm finding out. She fidgeted with her coffee cup. "I got a job. Nothing exciting. Receptionist at a dental office. But it's steady work with benefits. That's great. Jess, it's humbling is what it is, but necessary." She looked up at me. "I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the self-serving kind I usually give." I waited, not making it easier for her, but not putting up barriers either. "I've taken advantage of you for years," she continued. "We all have. It was easier to rely on you than to figure things out ourselves. And when you finally said no, we attacked you instead of looking at our own behavior." She paused. "I'm sorry, Roy. Truly." The apology felt genuine, which made it unprecedented in our relationship. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It means a lot. I'm not asking for money," she quickly added. "That's not why I wanted to meet. I miss my brother. And I'm starting to understand why you did what you did." We talked for nearly 2 hours. Really talked. Perhaps for the first time as adults. She shared her struggles with following through on commitments, her fear of failure that paradoxically led to consistent failure, her jealousy of my stability and success. I shared my perspective too, how I had felt used and unappreciated, how the emotional manipulation had damaged my ability to trust, how the financial burden had affected my own life plans. It wasn't a magical reconciliation. Too much had happened for that. But it was a beginning, a first tentative step toward a healthier relationship built on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. As the months passed, that new relationship slowly took shape. Jessica continued at her job, even earning a promotion to office manager. She moved into a modest apartment with a roommate and began taking accounting classes at the community college. We met regularly for coffee or dinner, carefully avoiding falling back into old patterns. My parents were a more complex situation. My father maintained that I had betrayed the family by cutting off support. He refused my invitations to family therapy and spoke to me only when absolutely necessary. My mother vacillated between defending him and secretly reaching out to maintain our connection. I held firm to my boundaries, neither punishing them nor rescuing them. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, watching them struggle financially when I had the means to help. But I reminded myself that helping in the old way had only perpetuated harmful patterns. True help meant allowing them to find their own solutions. A year after my Hawaii trip, much had changed. I had been promoted at work, partly because I was no longer distracted by constant family crises. I had started dating someone, Lisa, of all people, who had decided to visit Chicago and never left. I had found a better balance between work and personal life, taking regular vacations and pursuing hobbies I had neglected for years. Jessica graduated from her accounting program and found a job at a small firm. She still struggled sometimes with financial management, but she was learning, growing, making her own mistakes and finding her own solutions. Our relationship, while not perfect, was more authentic than it had ever been. My parents had downsized to a smaller house, adjusted to living within their means, and slowly begun to accept the new normal. My father still maintained I had abandoned my family duties, but even he had to acknowledge that Jessica was doing better on her own than she ever had under their protection. One evening, sitting on my balcony watching the sunset over Chicago, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The ultimatum that had seemed like the end of my family relationships had actually been the beginning of something healthier, more sustainable, more real. I had learned that sometimes loving someone means refusing to enable them, that boundaries aren't selfish but necessary for genuine relationships, that saying no doesn't make you a bad person, even when others insist that it does. Most importantly, I had learned that my value isn't determined by what I can provide for others, that I deserve relationships where giving flows both ways, that love without respect isn't really love at all. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Just got my first tax client. Dinner this weekend to celebrate? I smiled and replied affirmatively, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with financial transactions or obligation. This was the relationship we could have had all along. If only we had understood that true support means helping others grow, not keeping them dependent. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to step back and let them find their own strength. And sometimes, the most important person to stand up for is yourself. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? How did you find the courage to stand your ground when everyone was pressuring you to give in? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about navigating complicated family dynamics. Thank you for listening. And remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the most powerful act of love you can offer both yourself and others.